Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Job, and we have arrived in Job chapter 38. From here on, in the next few chapters, depicts and narrates some of the most incredible words that is in this book of Job. We also see an incredible experience that Job has, because from chapter 38 onwards, we see how God speaks directly to Job. And in so doing, the Jewish view of this God speaking to a man, and in particular, selected people, uh, is part of the understanding of prophecy. Now, the English word for prophet and prophecy probably doesn't resonate with us because the English language may have it differently. But in the Hebrew, the prophet is a navi. So let me just put it down. A prophet is a navi. And the prophecy that we are talking about as God speaks to the prophet is Nava. And so prophet and prophecy is really a Hebrew concept. And Nava is actually God speaking to man. And a prophet is somebody whom God speaks to and through in that sense. And so chapter 38 in the Jewish understanding becomes a Nava, or a form of a Nava. Why is it just a form of a Nava? Because when you read verse 1, then, which is and then, Jehovah answered, and notice this is Jehovah right here. Jehovah, he answered and responded to Job from the whirlwind. Now, this is a storm made of wind spiraling, and then it is also made of sound because of the noise of the wind. And in so doing, this is not a direct, clear communication by God to man in the typical prophet kind of an imagery. In this case, God is speaking to Job, but in a very uh, disturbed environment, in an environment where it impresses on Job that these things are to cause Job to sit up and listen to God. It is not so much as for Job to tell somebody, it is actually an impression upon Job. Whereas in a typical um, Nava kind of environment, they would be coming through a clearer conduit like a dream or a vision. But in this case, it is neither a dream nor a vision, but in a very physical experience. Now, I guess when God speaks to Job, he is depicting himself as the Almighty, that he is the one who is the maker of heaven and earth. And he speaks to Job in a very natural way, but he has chosen the storm, the whirlwind, to represent himself in a very scary way. And so when we use the English word awe, it is about fear. And so we ended chapter 37 when Elihu said all people should fear God because he is the one who does all these great works. And here in chapter 38, finally, God responded to Job. Now, why did God respond to Job is a very worthwhile question, which we can attempt to answer later on. But the fact is, Job was depicted as somebody who is blameless, upright, fears God, shuns evil. This is the characteristic of God regarding Job. Now, after some 36 chapters, he has gone through a lot. He has wished that he died. He had not sinned with his lips. He did not curse God and die as the wife had suggested. He had uttered words like, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. He is not blaming God for all these things, but he did try to find a rationale as to why he himself, one who is blameless, upright, fears God, and shuns evil, is experiencing such incredible calamity. He lost his wealth, he lost his family, and then he lost his health. And he's suffering in great pain and indignity. The 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 wisdom and fear and honor that he used to strut around is now gone. People are no longer afraid of him being righteous. And he is wondering, why has this happened? And that rationalization has made Job say a lot of things which he wished he didn't. And Elihu, in the last few chapters, put Job back in his place. That even when God doesn't speak, it doesn't mean he is not there. He is all watching him, and God made all these things. And why would God not know what's happening? And so now we are here in chapter 38 because Job accepted what Elihu had said. And we will see that at the end of the day, Job has his knowledge, his mind, his attitude, everything changed about God himself. And now God speaks to Job, right? And this is very important because God doesn't really speak to people in general. And so here he says, who is this who darkens plans or darkens counsel? And the idea here is who gives, right? Who gives, well, I guess you can say murky or darken, uh, murky as in waters, murky, counsel, and who speaks without knowledge. It is important for us then to understand that these are words that God is addressing Job, that you have spoken with murky means very, very unclear ways. You have spoken as if somebody who really doesn't know very much about God. Now, that is God speaking to Job. He's addressing Job in that way. And verse 3 begins, now tighten the belt on your waist like a man. This is good. This is good, right? Uh, gird up your loins, not waist, your loins, like a man. So tighten the belt is to gird up your loins like, and it's not just a man. The word here is not man. The word here is warrior. God wants to speak to Job, and he is there, presumably quite undressed, sitting on dust because he is in pain with boils all over. And God says, dress up, speak to me like a warrior, not like a sick person. Overcome your pain and come. I have something to say to you. I will ask you, and then you can reply me. Now, this is a very incredible expression. So it says, I am going to ask you a lot of things. And then you are supposed to make known to me, right? Make known to me your knowledge. Now, in these few chapters, we will begin to see how God describes himself. And for all intents and purposes, when people say that the book of Job is a fiction, they have no ability to explain these next few chapters. Did God speak or did God not speak? So the Jewish view is that God spoke, and we look at this, and God did speak. And these words are important to anyone reading the book of Job. The discourse by the three friends and Elihu and Job may have been words of men, some with more wisdom than others. But when we get to chapter 38, God is speaking to Job. I am going to ask you these questions. You can reply me. You can tell me what you think. Now, I wonder if we were in Job's position, how would you feel when God stands up in the whirlwind? And just imagine ourselves there. And I just invite us to put on our thinking caps and imagination that we are standing with wind blowing at us, whirlwind, and God's voice is launched out of the whirlwind, speaking to Job. And Job is hearing God's voice together with the blowing wind and the noise that comes from the wind. And he could see that in front of him, a very terrifying view. And that's where we will begin verse 4. From verse 4 onwards, God begins to correct Job's understanding of God, and perhaps also as we go through these texts that our understanding of God might have been fine-tuned as well. So let's begin. God asks him, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth?" This is now talking about God's design of the world. And so go back and we need to reflect on Genesis chapter 1. Tell me if you have understanding, if you can perceive this, if you have knowledge of this, tell me what you know. Where were you when I, God, laid the foundation of the earth? And in this case, it will be the land itself. So that the land has foundation, right? The land has foundation. So you can think of it this way, that if we have the land, and then there are foundations underneath the land. This is the concept that in vision that we can have. And this would be the crust. And hereby we would have the seas and the waters underneath the seas, right? Underneath the crust. So that's the picture we have in Genesis chapter 1. And so God asked Job, "Where were you when I started doing all this?" Look at this is as in day 3, right? Day 2 and 3. Day 1 is God brought the light and and put light so that we can all see what he's doing. Day 2 is the time when God created the crust of the earth, a very thin layer above the what we call the land that was covered with water in those days. And so God says, if you have understanding, answer me. Where were you when day 2 and day 3 came? when the dry land appeared. Where were you? So we have dry land here, and there were trees coming out on day 3. So the picture is given, and God continues because these are all rhetorical questions. Nothing Job can answer. Who puts its measurements, dimensions? Who decided how big, how thick the crust is, where the earth is supposed to be hanging? If you know it, tell me. Who stretched the measuring line over it? This would be the surveyor's line. Surveyor's line. No, engineers and architects, they would use something to measure. So how can you measure anything that God has created? On what were its bases sunk? These are the bases here. Or who laid its cornerstone? And God is depicting this like, a blueprint of a building. Do you know how the entire world was made? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Understand this. The morning stars, sons of God, the idea of sons of God here is B'nai Elohim. These would be angels. We have seen this in Job chapter 1 and 2. And so referring back to Job chapter 1 and 2, sons of God are angels, morning stars is a poetic term that depicts angels. Sang together, shouted for joy. So we have an A and a B. When God finished this in day 2 and 3, and everyone was singing praises of God. So where were you? These are questions that Job is being asked by God. And the answer is nowhere, right? Nowhere. Next, in verse 8, it talks about the sea. Who enclosed the sea with its doors? Now, this idea of doors in verse 8 talks about bolted doors. When it went out from the womb, bursting forth. This is a picture of a woman giving birth when the water bag bursts. And so what you see is this. The imagery is that the sea will just come into the beach. And at the beach, there is a limit for where the sea will stay. And it will not cross. And so the picture here would be, this would be the bolted door. That God has limit where the sea will end, even though it is gushing to the seashore. When I made a cloud its garments and thick darkness its swaddling bands, and I placed boundaries on it and set bolts and doors. And this is talking about the clouds itself. And as it rains, the sea comes out. And I said, and God said, as far as this point you shall come, but no further. And here your proud waves shall stop. This is basically telling us this picture. Who dares to put a limit to nature? Verse 12. It says, did you ever in your life commanded the morning? Now understand this word morning. Boker. This is when the light comes, and then it becomes brighter and brighter. And the English translates it as morning. But it is actually an imagery as the day dawns and it becomes brighter and brighter. And so he says here, and the dawn knows its place. Did you ever do that? And this is actually day one. And there was evening and there was morning. Now, morning is boker and evening is eretz. And God made the morning and God made the evening. God had decided how all these are to be so that it would take hold of the ends of the earth, and the wicked would be shaken off from it. Now, the idea here is that the sun and the brightness symbolizes 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 goodness and light, order, and that God will lift up the corners of the earth. The ends of the earth is like the corners of the earth. It's like the horizon. It is depicting like the curtain being lifted up. Then and darkness is where the wicked is depicted. And as the curtain is lifted up, and let me just show you how that might look like. So we have the horizon, and in the morning, everything is dark, right? In the morning, everything is dark. But the morning comes when the sun comes out. As the sun comes out, we would get the the light coming up slowly, and it gets brighter and brighter. And it gives us a picture as if these were curtains lifted up. That's the picture. This is all poetic language. It is changed like clay under the seal, and they stand out like a garment. Now, this is about, I guess, think of it, how the earth is like when the clay changes under the seal. Now, the seal here, uh, in many cases, is taken off as a human image, an imagery of a human image, and man is made out of the clay of the earth, and it's saying that one day man will live again. That is what it tends to say, that there is a new dawn, right? A new dawn after the darkness. And it depicts something like an imagery of an afterlife. Their light is withheld from the wicked, and the uplifted arm is broken. And this is really all a depiction of the morning. When light comes in the morning, slowly, as if the curtain is lifted up in the horizon. In verse 16, now once again, you recall in the beginning, in the Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 1 that the land is right at the bottom, and it's covered by water, and then there is the earth's crust. Water covers this part, and then these are the deep, right? And then there is water underneath as well. So there's water above and water beneath. And then right on top here would be your dry land. This is the concept that we see in Genesis chapter 1, right? Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to, I think, about 12. Day 1 through day 3. Now, follow me. Have you entered into the springs of the sea and walked in the depth of the ocean? So, what does that mean? It means that in the sea itself, there are springs coming out, right? Springs in the middle of the sea. Why? Because there is water from underneath the sea floor. Have you ever walked in the depths of the ocean? And this would be the home. Now, this idea of depth would be the depth all the way down, deep. And this would be Genesis 1, verse 2. And the Spirit of God or the wind of God hovered over the deep. That's the name of this, the deep, as in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. So God asks Job, have you ever walked in the depths of the ocean? Have you ever entered into the springs of the sea? And this is what is being depicted in Genesis chapter 1. Have the gates of death been revealed to you, and have you seen the gates of the deep darkness? Now, this idea here in verse 17 really tells us about the next life. Have the gates of hell, which is this word, of death being revealed to you? Do you know where you go after you die? Right? Do you know this place? Have you seen the gates of the deep darkness? Now, this idea of deep darkness in verse 17 really tells us that this is, I guess you can call this the should we do this, the shadow of death. This is also a poetic language, like in Psalms 23, verse 4. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and this is what it means. Deep darkness is the shadow of death. Have you seen this? Do you know where death begins? And that would be the line where people or mortal man like Job will never be able to tell, because once you cross that line, you can't come back. And so obviously he doesn't know. Have you understood the expanse of the earth? Now in verse 18, when it says expanse, that would be how broad and wide the land is. So if Job was to look at the world, it is a broad and wide space, and God asked him, can you see from end to end? Do you know what is happening? And so he says, tell me if you know all this. Now, obviously, Job will say, I don't know, right? I don't know. Verse 19. Now, verse 19 now says, where is the path? This word way is the path, the derech. Where is the path to the dwelling of light, and darkness, where is its place? This talks about death, which we talked about, the shadow, the valley of the shadow of death, will get you light and darkness. And do you know the path from this point on? And the idea is no, right? Darkness represents one place and light represents another. That you would take it to its territory and discern the paths on its way home. And the idea, do you know how all these work? And the answer is no. Because the Bible doesn't say much about it. And when God doesn't say much about it, then there's nothing much Job could say with regards to these answers. Verse 21, you know, or did you know, right? Did you know when you would be born? Now, this is not were, it would be, would be. And the number of your days. And this word is not great in this case. Um, in verse 21, this word would be how much, right? How long? And so God is asking, now, if this is death, let's talk about life. When? How long? This is God discoursing with Job. So we talked about death. We're now talking about life. You have no idea. Verse 22, have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Have you seen the storehouses of the hail? Both things we can see. Snow, unending. Hail, also unending. But where are they? Where did they come from? You don't know. It must be that in the time of Job, there's lots of snow and there's lots of hail. Verse 23, I have reserved them for a time of distress, for a day of war and a day of battle. Now, the idea here is to tell us that snow and hail, they are weapons of war. For who? For God. That in times of battles, the weather itself plays an incredible role to either protect or to attack. And perhaps you could see this in World War II, right? World War II. When Germany went into Russia to attack Russia, and the incredible winter uh, really defeated Germany. Where's the way that the light is divided? Divided here is dispersed. How is it spreaded out? And the east wind scattered on the earth. Now, in this concern, you would see that the east wind and the light talks about how God brings about natural snow, hail, and then you can see light and wind. These are all the natural phenomena that God controls, who has split open a channel for the flood and a way for the thunderbolt. And as it rains hard enough, you get the flood. The rain comes and you get torrential floods. And then for the lightning, to bring rain on a land without people or a desert without a person in it. Now, the idea here is God's mercy or kindness goes beyond mankind. Why? Because God cares for the land and God cares for the desert so that God can feed the place and the grass will grow again. And it doesn't care whether there's people or not, because people always think that people is the only thing that's important. So God is saying that you can't even decide on how incredible God's uh, ability is, how incredible God's kindness is. Why are you debating with me? Verse 27, to satisfy the waste and desolate of land, to make the seeds of grass to sprout. God can do that through the rain. And there's nothing that Job, as a mere mortal man, will understand all these things. Does the rain have a father who has fathered the drops of the dew? You don't need to have a father to deal with the sun, because all the natural terrain belongs to God, and God takes care of that as well. Whose womb has come to the eyes of frosts of heaven, who has given it birth. These are all imagery language, poetic language of rain, drops of dew, ice, frost. These are all things that comes from the sky. Water becomes hard like stone. Surface of the deep is imprisoned. This is about the frozen water or frozen lakes. Now God turns his attention to the space. Can you tie up the chains of the Pleiades? The Pleiades is a series of 7 stars, and they are tightly bounded together. Uh, and these are ideas of astronomy, right? Astronomy. These are, and then the Orion is widely spaced star. So this is tight. The Pleiades and the Orion. And so this is loose. I guess in the ancient days, some people believe that the 7 stars, the Pleiades, would deal with the cold, and the Orion, the warm. And these are all ancient beliefs. And so the idea here is, can you decide on the hot and cold? Can you decide on removing the cold or increasing the heat? This would be a more poetic language to speak concerning the stars and the constellations. So can you bring out a constellation in its season? The constellation here is the Mazzaroth, right? The Mazzaroth. And constellation here will be 12. And this would be 1 constellation above per month. When God devised day 4, the sun, moon, and stars above, the stars gives the constellation, and the constellation depicts the month of the year. And God gave the sun, moon, and stars for mankind to be able to tell time, and tell the time of day, the time of month, and the time of the year. Same with the bear and her satellites. That God is saying, all these things you see in the sky, and this is astronomy. And astronomy gives directions and gives time. All these things are done by God. Can you change this? And the answer is no. Verse 33. Do you know the laws of the heavens? Do you establish the rule over the earth? This is day 4. No. All the things that you see in the sky, the sun, moon, and the stars, God gave them the rule. God gave them the laws, what they are to do to provide direction and time to the people, and particularly eventually to Israel. Can you raise your voice to the clouds so that an abundance of water will cover you? Can you speak to the clouds and they will answer you? That's what God means, right? And the answer is, of course, not. Can you send flashes of lightning so that they may go, here we are, or come to you? this is about lightning? And the answer is no. Now, this one in verse 36 is something which we need to pay attention to. It says, who has put wisdom, right? This is important, wisdom, in the innermost being. Now, this word innermost being needs to be explained a little bit because the English is not very clear. This word would be the inner parts of the body. The Hebrew people looks at this. We have the body, which is the outer, and then somewhere inside the body, we have the spirit. And that spirit, or the breath of God, makes the person alive because it's moving. But deep inside the body, right? Deep inside the body, and this would be inside the body, God places the concept of wisdom, knowledge, the mind. All right. So wisdom, mind, they are unseen, but they are inside the body, very much inside. And so the idea of wisdom, the will, the mind, the heart, it is depicted by organs inside the body. And that's why the Hebrew uses organs of the body to depict things that is abstract, like Chokmah is abstract, right? The mind itself is abstract and it's inside the body. And so every time we talk about inside the body, we're talking about all these ideas of wisdom and mind. Verse 37, who can count the clouds by wisdom and pour out the water jars of the heavens? This is about clouds. Who, when the dust hardens into a mass and the clods stick together, what happens is that when the dust is wet and then the sun comes out, and then what happens? It becomes a hardened mass. How does all these things come together? When it is wet, it doesn't stick together. When it's dry, it sticks together. This is the clouds you can't control. You can take the dust and becomes wet and loose. And then when the sun comes out, becomes hardened. God also takes care of the animals. Can you hunt the prey for the lioness? Satisfy the appetites of young lions? No. God will do that even for animals in the wild. When they crouch in their hiding places and lie in wait in their lairs, God takes care of the animals. And our last verse is this: who prepares feed for the raven? Now, this idea here is who prepare nourishment, right? Nourishment. What does that mean? Now, the raven itself talks about a bird, blackbird. It tends to ignore its young. And then when the young cries to God, and this idea here is it's not about wander without food in the last verse. Um, the idea here is it's not wandering so much, but the idea here is helpless. I think there will be the idea of wander about is helpless. And so it depicts the young raven crying to God without the adult bird because the adult raven tends to ignore its young, God will feed them, the young, right? The young. And so we have come to 41 verses of an incredible exposition and discourse by God, asking Job, while you think that God has left everything to the natural world, to the course of life, where you think and trying to rationalize your suffering is due to the fact that God has just left everything to nature, God is now trying to explain to Job in chapter 38 that God is watching nature. God is taking care of nature. And so, if God is taking care of nature, God has not ignored the plight of Job. That's basically a very indirect approach to teaching Job that God is not gone. God is not taking a holiday. God is not ignoring Job. God is just quiet for the time being to see how Job would be with the friends and then with the Elihu. How would he respond to all these things? And what is in Job's mind about God? And so now in chapter 38, God is correcting Job. You don't have enough knowledge to talk about me, that I have not left everything to nature. I am the one who put nature together. I am the one who makes the laws to make sure nature works properly. And when the young animals have nothing to eat, God will take care of them. And that's basically what God is saying. And now we will continue tomorrow in Job chapter 39. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.